So a couple things I wish I would have known. First, regarding the SAT, is that just practicing can really help you. I wish I would have taken more practice tests. And I think because I started studying much closer to the test, so I took the test spring of my junior year, and I started studying that spring as well. So I think if I would have started taking practice tests summer before junior year, fall of junior year, I wouldn't have felt such a time crunch. And I probably would have done a lot more practice tests because I would have had the time. So I think starting to practice for the SAT earlier would have been nice. Another thing I wish I would have done, I've articulated before, is I wish I would have thought through how I was applying to schools more. Because I applied early action and submitted everything early, I regretted doing all the work I had for the applications that I ended up withdrawing. And I could have saved money, I could have saved time. So really thinking through the schools you're applying to and how you're going to apply to them, and whether or not like you really want to apply early action, and if you're applying early action, if you get into that school, if you really would go to it. The next thing I wish I would have started looking at earlier is scholarships, actually, because I think people get really bogged down by the application process, and in doing so, you miss a lot of scholarship deadlines. So I wish I would have been looking into scholarships before the application process, even junior year, looking at like what when senior year came around, I could apply to. Because you get really busy with your essays, getting your recommendation letters, filling out the applications, and scholarships just kind of fall by the wayside. So I think checking that out junior year and sophomore year and just seeing what's out there and what you could possibly do would be really great. And I mean, there's a lot of scholarship resources out there based on activities you do, based on your parents' employment, based on the bank you use, your ethnicity, where you're from. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I think starting that earlier would have been nice. Another thing I wish I would have done is be more knowledgeable about schools that I would have considered if I hadn't gotten into the schools I wanted to get into. So I applied to a really limited number of schools. I was pretty dead set on going to school in California. And so I applied to 4 California schools and Harvard. And if I wouldn't have gotten into Stanford and would have been deciding between those schools, I honestly think I probably would have been happier with some East Coast schools that are more challenging academic environment. I would have probably been happier at Dartmouth or Brown than, say, UCLA. And I hadn't really thought about that because location to me was such a big factor. So I really wish I would have done a better job of understanding schools that really weren't on my radar and checking more schools out. And I think you really have to do that in your sophomore and junior year, because senior year is all about filling out the applications. And if you haven't really put in the legwork to understand schools before then, you're not going to. So I think kind of starting that checking out schools process just to understand schools better, even if you don't really have a good idea of where you want to go. Then something I mentioned earlier is just starting to establish more long-term relationships with teachers. It's really easy to go through high school and have a teacher for 1 year and never have them again. Sometimes you're fortunate that teachers teach 2 levels of a topic and 2 levels that you'll end up taking, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. So if you do have a really great experience with a teacher sophomore or junior year, making sure you go back to talk to them in the following years, going back to them with questions about current classes you're taking, or just going back and talking to them in any capacity so that you stay fresh in their mind and they remember you when you want to go back for that recommendation, I think is a really smart idea. So making short-term teacher-student relationships into something more long-term is a good idea. Let's see. What else? That said, I understand that the way the college application process works now, people are starting sooner and sooner with worrying about it, with trying to get on top of it. That said, I think it's really important to still enjoy high school. High school has a lot of opportunities for you academically, extracurricular wise, and just creating great friendships that'll last you a long time. And don't let the college application process and that process kind of steal away your high school experience. So despite all these things you should be thinking about and preparing for, make sure you're still invested in high school.